Hello and welcome back. So in the last video we finished off by calculating or determining our relative frequency. So again, I wrote the formula over here, and it's a rough one. It's the value divided by the number of data. In the spreadsheet program, you select the cell divided by the sum, and we use those dollar signs to tell the program to keep using B11. So you can see there that dollar sign and the dollar sign. It says, that dollar sign says stay with B, and that dollar sign says stay on 11. So it locks it in, so you're dividing every time by B11. Okay, so that calculates your relative frequency. So that allows us to get that off the list. So we got that checked. Next, we're on to graph the relative frequency. Now, Google Sheets isn't perfect. So in a lot of programs like Excel, if I would hit the control, I can highlight the two columns, but you can't create a graph from there in Google Sheets. So the quickest way is just to copy it. So Control C, I'm going to paste it down below. Control V, relative frequency, Control C, paste it down here. And now you see if I just do a straight paste, it comes up with errors. So if I go paste special and the values only, it shows up. And again, you can convert it back to percent if you want. Okay, so we have to copy and paste the columns we want. They have to be side by side for Google Sheets to graph. And believe me, if this is the biggest downfall of Google Sheets, it's still 10 times better than some of the other software, free software that we have available on the school computers. So this is definitely not that big of a deal in the big picture. So now we can create our chart. Again, I go with the bar graph. And what I want to show is if you create this frequency graph, I'm just going to put that as the title. Should put the official one in, but for purposes of moving along here and not boring you, put that in. I'll insert. We'll shrink it just a little bit. If I put it over here, I know I'm covering up my one graph, but if you look at frequency, oops, and this should be relative frequency, sorry. Relative frequency and frequency graph, they have the exact same shape. All right, and it makes sense that they have the exact same shape because you're using the data. It's just the difference is instead of doing the actual frequency, you're doing the percentage of the amount of times that particular day occurred. So it's proportional. So that's why those graphs look very, very similar. All right, so oops, I'm just going to move that to the side. And there we go. So that one's graphed. Check that one off. Determining cumulative frequency. So cumulative frequency is another column we'll add in here. Cumulative frequency. And it is simply, I'm going to hit my equal sign, and I'm going to say, here's my value. Hit enter. Now, it's the running total, running sum. So the way you do this is you hit equals the cell above plus what we're adding, the next one. So you're adding the previous value plus the next one, and this gives you your cumulative frequency. Now I can copy that formula down because it's the same formula every time. The one above, so if we click on the formula, it's the one above plus the next one to give us our total. So there's cumulative frequency. All right, so same thing. I believe, if I'm over here, it wants us to graph it as well. So returning over here, highlight the column, Control C. Let's do it right here. And again, remember you need to paste special. You just want the values. So you right click it, paste special, values only. And there we go. That's what we're going to graph. And just as a comparison so you can see the difference, want a bar graph, customize the title, cumulative frequency. And I'll just hit insert. You guys can put your headers and tables in officially. So I just want to draw a comparison. So if we compare it to these guys over here, the frequency and relative frequency had the same shape. Cumulative frequency keeps growing because, like I said, it's a running total. So it should continue to add up until you reach 32 because that's the sum of the amount of data that we had originally. Okay, so they're your basic graphs. All right, so I'll just check that one off. So we have everything we need. Again, it's just going to be playing a little bit with your spreadsheets. Now I do have I got one more example, and there's a bit of a difference in this one, so let's go through it. And again, you have this already, but I just want to show you where I am. So there's two things you need to know, especially for the project: a continuous variable and a discrete variable. So a continuous variable, it's a variable that can have any value in the given range. So you can actually have decimal values. So if we're talking about height, you can have 32.5 centimeters, 58.6 centimeters. Weight's the same way. Discrete variables are variables that cannot have or must have, they can't have decimals. So they must be whole or integer values. So that would be people, for example, tickets. You can't have 3.5 people. You can't have 4.2 tickets. So those are the two that you need to be able to identify in the project when you're talking about your variable analysis. All right. So what happens when we collect data that really has too many different entries? So what I'm trying to say is, when we did days of the week in the previous example, there were only the 7 days. So there was only going to be 7 columns, and here, easy to graph, only 7. What happens if we get into, if you go and record the weight of 30 people in a class? Well, you could have 30 different weights. So do you really want a graph that has 30 entries? So what happens is we start to group the data or put it into intervals, and that's what this final example is about. So for large ranges in data, we have to use our intervals for the data. Okay, so for intervals, you must have, and here's your checklist, the intervals have to be the same size. Okay, if you're going to have from 0 to 10, that means then you got to make sure you have the same number of data points, and that's actually 11 data points. So the next one would go from 11 to 21. So you got to be very, very careful on that, making sure the same size. And all data must have a place to fit in your intervals. If a piece of data doesn't fit into your chart, then you're going to have to redo your entries. So it's must be very important to do it properly the first time, obviously. So the question is, how do you determine your interval size? General rule of thumb for this course, I'm looking for 5 or more intervals. So you must have 5 intervals. Sometimes you're going to look at it and say, well, it makes sense to have 10. Remember, using spreadsheets, so it's not that much taxing if you do go up to 10 or 9 or whatever. So you can go above 5, but you have to have at least 5. So how do we figure out our interval size? That is the next part. So your interval size will be as follows. It will be your max minus your min. All right, so you find your maximum value, and you subtract it from your minimum value of your data. So you're looking through the data to find the biggest value and then the smallest value. So just, oops. Get that straightened out. So maximum minus minimum, and then you are going to divide that by, underneath here, the number of intervals. Oops. Okay, so you take your max value minus the minimum value, and then you figure out your number of intervals. And what you want to do is you always want to round up. So even if you have 3.2, for example, so if you have 3.2, you want to round it up to 4. Okay, you always want to go larger. So that tells me that if I have 4 in my intervals, then I would go from, say, 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So there's 4 elements of the data in my first interval. Next one, I would start at 4, and I would go up to 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 4 data points in there. All right. Now that's for integer or whole values. If you have decimal values, you need to be a little bit more exact or precise. So each of those ranges would have 4 data points. So you can't just simply add 4. So you'd have 8, 9, 10, 11, and so on and so forth. Okay? But it's always important, you need to round up, even if it's 3.2, if it was 5.1, you would still round up. Okay? That ensures that you would have enough or large enough size in your data points to get all your data in there. All right. So sometimes it's going to make sense as to what you're going to split the intervals in. So when I look at midterm marks in this example, the following is a survey of 4U midterm marks. So I wouldn't even worry about for myself if I saw this right away. I would be saying, you know what, I'm just going to go and put in specific ranges for each, each particular level in there. So I'd be looking at, so what I'll do is, actually I'll just go to the board here and I'll get A started right away. So when I take a look at the range of marks, I think when I take a quick glance, the lowest mark here is a 41. So in A part, I will put a mark, and then we do our frequency, or our tally. So maybe that's the better heading to put there. So tally, and then we go to frequency. All right, so because it's 41, I'm going to go, let's go 40 to 49, 50 to 59, and you need to be consistent all the way down. 60 to 69, 70 to 79, 80 to 89, 90 to 99. And if the case of 100 came up, I guess I would have to go 100 to 109. Okay. So now you go ahead and you're going to do the tally. Now I'm not going to bother. I'm going to do it quickly for you so you don't have to watch me, the agonizing process of me doing a tally. And you see the tally, I got that done. However, when I got into doing the tallying, I realized there's marks in the 20s and 30s, so I had to add a couple columns there. So there is our frequency graph. All right, so I'm going to move back to the computer and find that in example number 2 in the spreadsheet. That's what I'm going to pull up. So looking at that, looking at the spreadsheet, then I'm going to go to example 2. And there's the tally. Now I went all the way down to 0, just for the purpose of including everything, I guess. So, what's question A want us to do? A wants us to create a frequency table. That is complete. Create a histogram. So we're going to use the spreadsheet to create the histogram. We will highlight, and we will insert a graph. And some of this I'm going to go through a little bit quicker here. Go to that style, and again, the one on its side allows the data to be shown nicely, but it doesn't have to be done in that fashion. And I'm just going to put histogram. You can put the official or the correct title on there, and the headers as you see fit. I'm kind of cutting corners just for keeping the video short enough, showing you the basics. So there's our histogram. Going back to Smartboard. Done. Create a pictograph. Again, I know this is not an official pictograph, but it's good enough for our purposes. So if you go to more types of graphs, more, this one kind of shows things off, not too bad. It's good enough for me. I'm not a big pictograph fan, to be quite honest, but so it goes 0 to 10. That'll show the gauges well enough. I'll insert that. And oops, there are apps out there. I'm sure that you can find an internet app that will successfully draw a pictograph for you. But I mean, for the amount of importance, I just want you to identify that it involves pictures instead of your standardized graph. So going back, we've done C part, and now we are on to D part. And just for the sake of not rushing, I am going to stop the video there and finish it up in the third and final video. There are a little bit of differences here because we do have a range of marks. So we are going to, I'll just talk about that in the next video, but how to deal with, or if there's any trouble with those ranged marks.